for this learning session together. There's great interest in the South Suburban and Cook County land banks, and we are delighted to have the right audience and the right experts in the room to learn together and to put these tremendous new tools to work. I want to introduce a little bit about why the Metropolitan Planning Council offered to partner with the land banks in putting together this workshop, and then set the stage a little bit for today before we turn it over to our panel and discussions and dialogue. The Metropolitan Planning Council is celebrating its 80th year this year, and some of the things that we reflect on as ingredients of how we get things done actually turn out to be the same things I'm seeing the land banks deploying to get their work done. So I think it's just a good reminder about why this city, why this region works, why we are able to be productive about addressing our biggest challenges. So the Metropolitan Planning Council is known for bringing the right institutions together. We do that across the private sector, across government, across community organizations. And a lot of times people pay that lip service, but we know the value of figuring out who the people are that you need to get in the room and use those relationships or build new relationships to get things done. That's the same kind of partnership that the land banks are working to build. So it's kind of a no excuses approach that if you know you need some certain kind of expertise or perspective, you need to go make it easy for people to come to the table. So we hope that's one of the ways that you will help us as a result of today is identify those people who need this information so that we can stay in touch with them as well, even if they weren't in the room. We also believe in talking about our many assets as a metropolitan region and making them work together. The ripple effect, the return on investments when you deploy land and financing and leadership and environmental, economic, cultural assets together is so powerful. And this region is known for doing it better than many other places. And the final thing is to make sure that we're not just thinking about today, that we're looking long term. And that is very much part of the mission of the land banks, making sure that we're making good decisions that will be good for future generations and generate the kind of future that we all want. So the reason why I'm delighted to join you in setting the stage today is that I was invited to participate in the Cook County Land Bank Advisory Committee. I was approached this summer, right around this time in 2012, President Preckwinkle called, and we at MPC had already been involved with our South Suburban partners in creating a collaborative to work on housing foreclosure issues and then tools coming out of that collaborative, including the creation of a land bank. So South Suburban blazed the trail, and Cook County looked around the country and said, we can do this. We can do it probably better than other places. And so to see where we are today is very gratifying. So a couple of things to set the stage. First of all, why did we need a land bank? The 2010 census shows us that 200,000 housing units at that time were vacant in Cook County. And we all know firsthand the drag that those vacant and abandoned properties place on our quality of life, our tax base, the drag on our competitiveness collectively. And while today, as an update on the 2010 census, the recovery is proceeding, it is very uneven in our region. And many communities are seeing some increase in market activity, but others are not. DePaul University's data helps us understand this. Neighborhoods experiencing declines in housing prices are the places where we've seen 27% growth in foreclosure filings. So that's the negative part of the story. And in some Chicago neighborhoods, south and west sides, 1 in 6 homes is a vacant home. So land banks are a solution to this major challenge. Not the only solution, but a big tool that we didn't have before, and now we do. So the land banks are stepping forward to fill this need. The organizing came from multiple places, as I mentioned, serving on the advisory committee for the land bank. I've served on my share of task forces in my time in both government and now in the not-for-profit sector. I have never been involved with a task force that moved this quickly. It was convened in early fall. It was given until late fall to complete its work, so by November, preliminary report, final report by December. The ordinance was introduced to the Cook County Board in January, passed in February with the board named immediately, and then applications for funding submitted in March. I mean, it was boom, boom, boom. And that's the way these things have to work if you're going to be strategic and opportunistic. So that was exciting to see that strong partnership at work, both at the advisory council level and then at the board. We see this strong partnership ingredients. The leadership has continued to represent on both land banks civic, financial, legal, community development professionals. We also, at the time of the formation of the Cook County Land Bank, had significant assistance from the Urban Land Institute. Technical Assistance Panel is a tool that they've used both nationally and in this region. The District Council for ULI is the strongest ULI District Council in the country. And so putting that group of professionals to work helped us hear from more than 100 stakeholders. The South Suburban Housing Collaborative came out of the leadership of the South Suburban Mayors and Managers and represents 24 South Suburban communities. They got started in 2009. And both land banks, I'm very pleased to report, and you'll see this in action today, are working closely together. The land banks are, I think, filling a void because of their nimbleness, because of their flexibility, because of their ability to respond to needs and bring the different players together. So the partners are ever changing. I want to recognize, in addition to South Suburban Mayors and Managers at the Cook County level, key leaders were, of course, Commissioner Bridget Gaynor, President Tony Preckwinkle, and literally hundreds of people who generously gave of their time. But the models are a little different, and I think it's important to reflect on that when we learn from each of the land banks and how to access and how to interact effectively and productively with each of them. The South Suburban Land Bank grew out of municipal leadership. It is anchored by a very strong council of government, the South Suburban Mayors and Managers. And we brought in national experts. Both processes of forming land banks were benefited by a group called the Center for Community Progress, which is really the preeminent leader on land banks around the country. And we were able to learn about things we wanted or didn't want, similarities, but we also quickly determined that there was no one land bank model around the country that was exactly right for our needs here. So St. Louis, probably too liberal, Twin Cities, maybe too rigid, Detroit, too many land banks that weren't working together. There were a lot of interesting lessons that we benefited from. And so the Land Bank Authority in Cook County today is the biggest in the country. And that's important, to have the scale to deal with the scale of the problem that we face and to unlock that economic impact. Another way that the Cook County Land Bank is different, in addition to the obvious one of scale, is having an independent board. So it's quasi-governmental, a little bit more like the Cook County Hospital in relation to county government, and that gives it some tremendous flexibility. So these two land banks are new, and you might have started to read more about them in the newspaper. In Crain's recently, Brian was his attractive face was right there, right on the front of Crain's front page. And that kind of attention is really important because a lot of people haven't heard about the land bank or can't spend the time or don't really even know about gatherings like today. So the buzz is growing. And the resources are secured. These two land banks went in jointly, thanks to the national opportunity through a joint Attorneys General settlement on foreclosures, and secured $6 million together to help start up the land banks. So not only is there a good strategy and structure and leadership, but some dollars to actually get things done. The South Suburban Land Bank, hats off to them for also securing $500,000 through IDA, through their abandoned properties program. So I think that's why Crain's and other media are noticing and commenting on the potential of this land bank. Today, we've seen the first 2 transactions from Cook County, and that's only a year and a half after startup, and of course staff has been on board much more recently. And that those first 2 transactions happened last month. The South Suburban Land Bank has a little bit more time and experience under their belt, and they have demonstrated their value as well in doing 6 property transactions, and both entities have many more in the pipeline. Today is about learning, and I'm delighted that you'll have a chance to hear from a number of our strong partners, and any of us want to help demystify this process. That's what this morning is about, but if you have questions that don't get answered, there are people here from MPC, from the land bank staff, that are delighted, and many others are delighted to answer those questions. I just want to acknowledge a couple of my team members, Marisa Navarra, who directs our community development and housing program. We also have Brianne Gala, who has been involved with working with me and MPC on the land bank since day one, and Yonina Gray, who I'm going to introduce next, my colleague who is going to be helping facilitate today. So those are a few people that you might want to have a chance to say hello to this morning. And I just want to thank the private bank, thank our partners for making today possible, and we hope you'll come to us for ideas about other ways we can help ensure the success of the land banks. Thank you for your attention, and again, let me welcome my colleague, Yonina Gray.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And like Mary Sue said, today is about learning. So our objectives for today is to have all of you learn about how to utilize the land banks as a tool for repurposing land, how organizations, individuals, and businesses can become qualified to do business with the land bank, and to hear about some best practices for researching and financing your projects. So today's agenda will entail a space for you to ask questions at the end of every section, so we encourage you to participate. You'll find a couple of mic stands throughout the audience. So at the end, I'll give you a signal for you to step up. I'm sure Brian and Russ would appreciate you asking those questions now so that they don't get your emails and calls during the work week. So today I will be facilitating the program, so I'll be making introductions and keeping track of time. We see today as an introduction to the land banks, not at all intended to be a comprehensive tutorial. In fact, we will be looking to you at a later point for your input on additional workshop content. At your tables, you should receive the resource guide, and so that is a reference for you at a later point so that you can revisit all of the topics that will be discussed today, so we encourage you to hang on to that. And just so that you know, the workshop will be videotaped and we will post it online in case you'd like to watch the program at a later point. So we will, and so here is a snapshot of all the partners that helped us develop today's content. They've all brought their years of experience to figure out how to teach you how to do business with the land bank, and I hope that you will find their presentations helpful. So getting into so we're going to start with an overview of land bank goals, policies, and operations. On the panel will be Russ Brighton. He's the first executive director of the South Suburban Land Bank and Development Authority. Under Russ's leadership, the South Suburban Land Bank and Development Authority has been awarded over $2 million in funding. Prior to joining the South Suburban Land Bank and Development Authority, Russ served as Director of Development and Programs for the nonprofit Chicago Metropolitan Housing Development Corporation. Welcome, Russ. We also have Brian White. Brian was named the Executive Director of the Cook County Land Bank Authority of January of this year. Brian has spent most of his career working in nonprofit community development here in Chicago. We also have Brent Denson joining us. Brent is from Ansel Link. He provides legal counsel to the land banking authorities in acquiring, managing, and repurposing vacant and abandoned properties. Brent's going to be on hand throughout the workshop to provide answers to any legal questions that you have regarding the land banks.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Do I need to do the what do you call the typical good morning, everybody? I'm really excited to be here. When I joined the land bank in January of this year, there was obviously some trepidation about the size and the scope of the responsibility that I was taking on to try to be the leader of such an organization that has so many people's vested interests, hopes, dreams, aspirations, etc. So to see a few short months later, I think there's 175 people registered for today's presentation, and so many of the people in this room are people who I've had the good fortune to work with over the last 12 years or whatever. It's extremely exciting to be up here and to see the response we've had to the land bank. So thank you all really genuinely for coming out. Before I get into the presentation, I'd like to just acknowledge a few folks in the room. Mary Sue acknowledged the private bank, our sponsors for this morning's event, so I'd like to just recognize Kathy Thompson, Brand Aarons, and of course Larry Richmond from Private Bank who are helping to put this together. It's a wonderful program, a wonderful opportunity, and of course we wouldn't be here without them. So thank you very much to Private Bank. I'd also like to recognize some of the elected officials and others we have in the room. Commissioner Gaynor, I don't know if she's had a chance to get here yet, but she's been a tremendous leader on this issue. Obviously, President Preckwinkle, who I think we'll be hearing from later on today, is super important to this as well. We have Commissioner Moore and Commissioner Garcia from the Cook County Board with us today. We have Mayor Nicholas Helmer from Prospect Heights, who's one of the Land Bank board members. We also have Jim Planey and Steve Porras, who are Land Bank board members. So in addition to myself and the staff of the Land Bank, there are a number of people here who have been very much involved in the Land Bank since almost the get-go, and I would ask you to please take advantage of their availability. Also, the commissioner's staff is here, and they've been a tremendous support in helping us get the Land Bank up and running. There's no way we could be at this point without the staff of the commissioner's office, who's just been extremely available to us, so I want to recognize them as well. So let me, and last but not least, of course, our staff. So could I just ask Natasha and Eric, could you guys just stand up for a second? Eric Williams is our senior acquisitions manager. He's the person you're going to be dealing with looking to acquire property or convey property to us. Natasha is our, I don't exactly know what your title is. She's my right-hand woman who helps keep me on track. So if you're trying to schedule a meeting, you're trying to have a conversation, these are the people you're going to want to see. They'll be here throughout the day, so if you don't have a chance to speak to me directly this morning, which I think you will be able to, obviously you know that they're here. So thank you guys very much. They've been with us for about 5 weeks and 3 weeks, and I have not scared them away yet, so that's a good thing. Okay, so let's see if can I take this off? Will this work? So I can see the screen?
Right.
Does this work? Can you hear me? Okay. I need to be able to move around a little bit. So we put together a presentation that we wanted to show you, just for those of you who have not had a chance to engage the land banks. And actually, even before I begin, can I just have a show of hands? How many people in the room feel like they have a basic understanding of what a land bank is? Not a land trust, but a land bank. Could you just raise your hands? So pretty healthy knowledge of this. Okay, so one of the issues that we've both encountered, I think, is making sure people understand just what a land bank is, because Illinois does not have land banks up until these two organizations. And so there's a learning curve that we've encountered, and I'm glad to see that so many people have that knowledge already. So this is a picture of the housing market that we inherited, foreclosure filings by different type of property type from 2005 to 2012. You can just see a massive spike in foreclosures. We're all familiar with these statistics. The issue with the land bank is that this was the context for the creation of the land bank, was how do you deal with this massive inventory of property that is getting bogged into the Cook County court system. Illinois, as a judicial state, gives a tremendous amount of attention to the rights of the homeowner. There's protections for tenants to make sure the tenants aren't being displaced unfairly. This creates a significant backlog within the court system. We have a lot of property that's accumulating that has either been abandoned, oftentimes to homeowners when they get the foreclosure notice, they leave. We have properties where people have broken into those homes that have been abandoned and vacant. So we have a huge inventory challenge, and the land bank was created to try to help address this particular challenge. We also have, and this is a slide just showing the city of Chicago, we also have a historic issue related to the population of the county. Cook County and the city of Chicago have seen population shift as well as population declines based on various economic issues, availability of jobs, quality of neighborhood schools, safety issues, access to transportation, the cost of housing, a whole variety of factors. So we always want to be mindful that there is a broader context to the work that we're doing here. It's not just about the real estate and the housing. It's not just about the industrial and commercial land that is underutilized. It's also about what is going on with our broader population trends, and the fact that the county that we have today was probably built for a population that was existing back in 1950 and 1960, and that population has changed. And so we have to be mindful of how we reposition property within the context of where people want to live and what people want to do as far as employment and other opportunities. The basic mission that that I see when I came on board was to attack the huge inventory of vacant, abandoned, tax delinquent, foreclosed properties. I see my particular role in the role of the land bank, our challenge is to bring the inventory down. So as we go through how do we go about that, and then you start to engage the land banks, I hope you will see that we are open to many different suggestions and many different ideas, because our core mission is simply bring the inventory down, get this property back into productive use. Productive use isn't always going to mean that it's occupied. It may mean that there's property that has to be deconstructed or demolished and turned into vacant land for green space, urban agriculture, energy, solar farms and wind farms, and who knows what other types of things are going to be happening here. But basic idea that I see, the basic mission we have, is to reduce this inventory, get it back into productive use. We also want that use to be sustainable. So there are certain uses that are going to be interim or temporary uses, but the goal is really to have the land bank facilitate and be a conduit for the repositioning of land and the repositioning of property for the future, not just for the next 2 years, but the next 20, 30, 40 years. So how do we go about doing that? This slide basically shows that we will acquire, hold, and transfer interest in real property for the following purposes. So first one is, again, promoting redevelopment of the different types of property. We're focusing on vacant, abandoned, foreclosed, or tax delinquent. It doesn't mean that we won't look at properties that are occupied. It doesn't mean that we won't look at properties where the taxes are paid. It just means that our primary focus is going to be on those properties that have the most need for the intervention that we can offer. We want to make sure the work that we're doing is targeted toward neighborhood stabilization and community stabilization efforts. So a lot of the slow progress you may have seen in the land bank, or maybe it seems fast to you, to me sometimes feels slow, because people who know me know that I'm a little bit impatient. I like to get things done yesterday. But it's because we want to make sure that we're engaging communities and understanding what is it you guys are trying to accomplish? What is it that the community wants to see with this land? How do we facilitate that transition? We're not going into neighborhoods or going into communities and just starting to acquire stuff without having engaged on some level the municipalities and the community-based organizations. We're also looking at all different types of property. And the last one is that we want to see that, if we can, that we use our efforts to sustain and preserve affordable housing, that we promote economic development, that we are involved in the conservation of land and conservation of property, and that we focus specifically on job creation. So a lot of the property that we see in Cook County that needs to be demolished or deconstructed, there is a cost to doing that, but there's also a choice to be made as far as how we go about that. And what we'd like to see the land bank do as much as we can is link together job creation, conservation, economic development, and housing in a way that's a complete strategy, so that if we have to deconstruct a piece of property, it's actually being deconstructed with a crew of people who are hired through workforce development programs, putting people back to work. Because at the end of the day, none of this is going to work if we don't keep rebuilding the economy. People need jobs, they need employment, they need wages. So those are the sort of the key goals. And when people ask me, what kind of projects are we looking for to work with, my response is, does your project touch on affordable housing, economic development, conservation, or job creation? If it does, those are great wins for us. If they don't, are there things we can do to link you up with projects or programs or activities that have those elements in them? It's not a requirement, but those are the goals we have. So in terms of how we work, the land bank is intended to be a countywide organization, countywide governmental unit working in partnership with local stakeholders. We work through the county's existing home rule authority. So the land bank was established through ordinance. There's not a statutory carve-out that gives the land bank exceptionally different powers than what already exists within ordinance or exists within state statute. The difference between what we had before the land bank was created and what we have now is that the land bank was created intentionally to focus only on this issue. So where we see our role is that we help to add value to other people's projects, other people's work, where maybe it's a municipal partner that doesn't want to take that property onto their tax rolls. They work with the land bank. Maybe it's a development entity that's trying to assemble parcels that are not contiguous and they need time to assemble each individual parcel. They work with the land bank. Maybe it's a development project that involves converting space for green space for watershed management, and there needs to be a temporary holding time between when the land is coming from its existing use to being transferred to the forest preserve or the water reclamation district. The land bank can be used. We are still subject, though, to the statute. So the tax policy or the tax code, the municipal authority that a home rule municipality has, those things govern how we go about operating, which is why we have to work in partnership with other people. The last part is that the land bank is intended to be very broad and flexible. So we are open to lots of different ideas and suggestions. We're trying to pursue many different strategies at the same time. And the idea is that, again, if we're singularly focused on the vacant, abandoned, and tax delinquent property, then we can do lots of different things in different ways in different communities. The land bank is transactional in nature. So, as I said earlier, we see ourselves as a conduit between what the current use is and what the future use is going to be. And we're also very much demand-driven. So what we're looking for from you who are here is your ideas about how a particular piece of property or pieces of property can be redeveloped for a future use. We don't see the land bank as being a planning entity. The county is fortunate to have any number of very sophisticated planning organizations. There are many organizations in the county that are engaged in affordable development, affordable housing development, economic development, job creation, you name it. We're not putting ourselves out there to say we know all the answers. We're putting ourselves out there to say, put us to work. Bring us your ideas. Bring us your strategies. So the demand that we get is what drives what we're doing. It also means on the individual property that our acquisition of property is really determined by its disposition. Some of the land banks around the country have been used by the various authorities as essentially holding grounds or repositories for all the vacant land in a particular area or all the distressed property. So all the property gets put into the land bank, and the land bank then has to kind of sort out what they have. We're not really working that way. Our resources are limited. Our interest is not to hold property indefinitely. So we're not taking stuff in if we don't think we can do something constructive with it on the backside. So if people came in thinking, well, why isn't the land bank acquiring all the vacant property in the city of Chicago? Why isn't it acquiring all the distressed homes in Cook County? Because we don't have the resources. We could go into any one of the distressed communities and acquire all those properties, and we'd be out of business financially very quickly. Other things we're working on is trying to improve the title clearing process, trying to streamline demolition of property, and really trying to expand stakeholder capacity and understanding. So today, the nexus of this was the folks at MPC approached us and said, what is something that we can do to help with the land bank? And I said, we could really do something great by organizing an event where we bring all the different folks who want to work with land banks together under one roof and just start to explain what it is we do so they can start to engage us at a very substantive level. So expanding the stakeholders' capacity and understanding of how to use the land banks and how to use different property acquisition and disposition strategies is part of what we're doing here. In terms of our process flow, question of how do we go about acquiring it, we will either acquire property because we use existing data to identify property that might need to be acquired. We go about independently trying to acquire it. Or more importantly, we work with partners who identify particular pieces of property they want us to acquire on their behalf or with them. Once a property is acquired, we take it in, we hold it. As a unit of government, the property is going to be held tax-free. There's an opportunity during that process for us to evade certain taxes and liens depending on how it's acquired. That's a question I'll kind of defer to counsel, because I'm not an attorney. And then we're going to convey it back out into the public, and it's going to be conveyed out hopefully as simple and as free as possible. We want the property to go back to be used by the end user without a lot of deed restrictions and encumbrances. It's going to make it difficult for you to execute. So if you're looking to acquire property from us, the expectation is you're going to get that property with free and clear title, and it's yours to execute. The way we control the execution is if somebody doesn't execute, they won't get properties from us in the future. So we're not necessarily going to go back and say, hey, we want to recapture the property because you didn't develop it. We want to know who you are going into it and know that your plans are fully baked so we can have a high degree of confidence. If you don't execute, then we won't be working with you in the future. Other opportunities, so I think I mentioned some of these already, but the ability to assemble parcels for redevelopment, holding property tax-free, conduit agreements. These are agreements where we acquire property where we know that the conveyor and the acquirer, we've established an agreement where we're going to acquire specifically to convey to that end user. Obviously, all of our work is going to be with other governmental partners when it comes to extinguishing liens and back taxes. The commitments for financing, we have a number of financial partners in the room. We have some folks here from the lending institutions as well as the CDFIs. We know that the challenge many people face is to go into the funding partners and show them that the project has actually got firm commitments to get control of property. So the land bank can be a really useful assist in getting site control for properties and being able to go back to those funding partners and say, we now have the ability to get these parcels through the land bank. We need to get the funding flowing to make our project work. Last one is the implementation of community plans. So we're trying as much as we can, given the limited staff we have as of today, to understand and incorporate the various plans throughout Cook County and the different municipalities into some kind of a cohesive picture so that people can, so we can execute and add value. with what's already been started by those different partners. Okay, lastly, I'm just going to wrap up here. I know I'm running short of time, but the land bank, in terms of its nimbleness, I have the ability to accept and convey single-family homes and vacant lots without having to go through much of an additional approval process. So it's a very easy way for us to get property in and out of the land bank. Other types of acquisitions have to be reviewed and approved by the Land Transactions Committee and the Land Bank Board. Those are the Land Bank Board is the final stage for approval. So assuming that we've had a partnership agreement with the various entities involved, there's no further approval needed for land bank transactions. It's the land bank board, and then it goes back out into the public. We have to recover our holding costs. So when we're conveying property out, be aware that property is not free. Property actually comes with cost, which is the cost that we incur to acquire it. Obviously, we're not paying taxes, but if there's an acquisition cost, if there's cost to secure the property, if there's maintenance of the property, those costs are supposed to be recovered by the land bank. For-profit development, we're typically looking at trying to recover fair market value. Challenge we have there is that you see a lot of property for which there is really no market. So what is fair market value? It's going to be relatively low cost because we just want to get the property back into productive use. Lastly, keep it simple. Those that have worked with me, those that know me, I think I have a reputation of being relatively pragmatic. Sometimes I can get a little creative, but basically trying to keep it simple. So if your project does not have a role identified for the land bank, then we don't need to work together. I want to be really clear about that. If we cannot identify a value add the land bank brings to your project, then we don't need to work together. So it really requires thinking, what is it we're doing that makes your project work better? And if we can't think of anything, then we just keep on going on to other projects. But we want to keep it simple. We want to, try to work to add value. So here are just some examples of some of the things we're looking at. So you see up here a transit-oriented development strategy in the western suburbs. Obviously, some of these pictures of the vacant properties where there's actually good housing stock. Chicago and Cook County are fortunate. We have a lot of well-built brick housing and big brick buildings that have great salvage potential. They just need people to come in and occupy. Where we can't use the property, we end up with vacant lots. We have the ability to do urban agriculture and community gardens. There's a lack of green space and parks in many communities. And then the last slide shows us the rebuilding exchange, which is a way for us to take salvaged building material and put it back out into productive use for repurposed building material or other types of repurposed objects. So closing out for my portion right now, in terms of how you can be engaged, we have monthly meetings. They're all open to the public. They're typically held at your MPC or another open location downtown. We have several committees, including our Land Transactions Committee, a Sustainability Committee, and a Data and Analytics Committee. And last but not least, and probably the most important of all of these, is if you're looking to get involved with the land bank, please review the land transactions policy and the ordinance that was used to create the land bank. Very important, it's very helpful for us, for you to understand what it is that structures how we work. Those that actually take time to read the land transactions policy typically come back and say, wow, this is actually what we can do. We can do these things under the policy. And I say, yeah, it's really designed to be flexible and nimble, and it's not particularly restrictive policy. There's a lot of room in there to work. If you don't read the land transactions policy, you're just missing an opportunity to get a head start on those different projects. You can sign up for updates on our website, cookcountylandbank.org. And if you would like to schedule time about a specific project, obviously I'll be available to meet with you as time permits. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Russ Redden. I'm the Executive Director of the South Suburban Land Bank and Development Authority. First, I just want to say thank you for everybody to come out today. This is a great event. The turnout is fantastic, so thank you for coming. I want to give a special thanks to MPC, specifically Yolina and Brianne and Mary Sue for allowing us to be involved in this, and to Cook County because we're able to utilize some of the things they're doing, and it's very helpful to have a partner in all this. What I'm going to do is, the good news is I can kind of just say what he said, because a lot of the same things he just went over are really identical or very similar to the South Suburban Land Bank. So a lot of the things we want to look at, how we want to review things is very similar, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through those kind of things again. What I will do is talk about kind of what the differences are between the two land banks. But I would encourage a couple things, and I'll try and make this point again and again. Talk to us. Talk to myself, talk to Brian, talk to staff. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of potential things. We certainly don't have all the answers. We're all new to this. But there is always a discussion we can have and see if there's a role for one of the land banks or both. We do work well together. We are working together on a number of things, so there may be opportunities that both land banks would be involved in something, maybe not. I'm happy to defer to them. They're happy to defer to us if that makes sense. So just know that if you call Brian and it's something in the south suburbs, he may call us or he may say maybe talk to Russ. That's more up their alley. Vice versa, I may say, hey, talk to the county or let's bring them in on the conversation. So I just want to be clear on that and encourage you to talk to us and after this event's over, you'll have chances for questions, but you'll come up with other things. Also, I do want to say thank you to Private Bank for putting this on. This is certainly a great venue for this. The South Suburban Land Bank, I'll show you our mission. Very similar mission statement to what the county's doing. We underlined the last portion. It's consistent with local government plans and priorities. That's really the key to how we're set up and what we do. We are made up of municipal members, so we have cities and villages that are our members, and I'll go through that in a second. But we are set up differently than the county, obviously. But we work very closely with our municipal members to identify areas that are concerned, priority areas, things like that. So to give you kind of an overview of how we're different, we are an intergovernmental agency, so we're made up through an intergovernmental agreement that's signed between our municipalities. We can work in Cook and Will County. I won't concentrate too much on Will since this is a Cook County event, but we can work in Will County. Each of the land bank members, when they become a member, they get a seat on our board. So our board, if our board members, I see Mark Miller over there, but if anybody from our board or from the towns could stand up just to show folks who they are, I would appreciate it, just so people can see. We've got members here. If you can't track me down, talk to one of them. Each one of the towns is interested in talking to developers, interested in working on different projects. So they may have things that it makes sense for the land banks to be involved in. They may not. We're happy to convey the information, get you in touch with the right people. So that's part of this too, is to get you in touch with some of these other players and begin these conversations. Like the county, we can acquire, we can hold. We probably take a little bit of a strategic difference with the county in that we're willing to do some redevelopment and renovation activities ourselves. One of the challenges in the south suburbs is kind of a lack of developers and other players we can bring in to do some of this work. So I would encourage you guys, if you're a developer, contractor, or anybody, if you're not doing work in the south suburbs, come check us out, come look. We may have something that you'd be interested in. So anybody with a city bent, please, take a look. There's a lot of things we're working on, and you might be interested. We will take occupied property. The key is really the vacant property and repurposing that, but we will take occupied. We've talked about that. We have a number of projects in the pipeline that would have occupants, so we're not necessarily afraid of that. It's just kind of a different process. We've got a quick acquisition disposition process, so it's basically a board or a committee action. So we can get answers if we're buying or selling something pretty quickly. We can always call a special meeting if we have to. So if there's something really time sensitive, we can work on that. But that's something we try to pride ourselves on, is being able to get an answer, get something under contract, close on it quickly so it can start work. We've got $2 million in funding. We've got funding like the Cook County Land Bank from the Attorney General's office, so we thank them for that. We've also started getting funding from IDA, and I think from many of the funders, it's a more efficient process to go through the land banks than maybe individual municipalities in some of these programs. So for us, we can bring together a number of municipalities, put in a joint application to IDA for abandoned property. They gave us, I believe, $550,000 approximately, but it was efficient for IDA because they can deal with us instead of 6 different municipalities and having to try and close loans and things with them. We are able to acquire residential and commercial, so we've got both in the pipeline. We have flexible parameters, so I think one thing, we're not averse to risk, so we will look at risky things and see if it makes sense. If it makes sense, you know, we may take on something like that. And again, we work with local plans, so everything has got to go through the filter of, is this an important project and something we need to do in that specific municipality. Here's our member communities. We're able to work throughout South Cook and will with the support of the municipality, but the folks that are listed here have all passed our intergovernmental agreement. So we have kind of special specific powers and abilities in all of these communities, and you can see we're from Blue Island out to Joliet and kind of different places in between. So a lot of different types of communities, a lot of different demographics. And here is a couple examples of properties we have in inventory now, just to give you an idea of kind of what we're looking at and what we're taking on. The property in Park Forest on the left we'll talk about later, as well as the property in Oak Forest on the right. The 2 in the middle are donation properties. So we are taking on a lot of donations, single family, but we're also looking at larger projects that are redevelopment, true redevelopment. This property in Oak Forest here will get demolished, and it's a mixed-use housing project that's going to happen when that's done. So that'll be something we'll talk about a little bit in more depth, but we're looking at a lot of different types of properties, a lot of different projects. Like I said, please just contact us, let us know what your ideas are, and we will try and see if there is fit for the land bank. And I think that is it. There's my information. Go to our website, call me. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but just get a hold of us, and then we can talk more specifically. But we'll get into some specific transactions a little bit later today, and I think that'll give you a better idea of kind of how we look at it and what we're trying to do when we do something specifically. So that's all I have. I don't know if that's friendly. Questions? Are we doing questions now? Okay.
You need to come tell us what you're supposed to do.
So we can welcome anyone have questions at this point. Otherwise, we can go into the next session. Okay, we can go to the next session. I'm sure you'll have questions at some point. So the next session, we'll talk about how to donate and acquire property.
Seriously, there's no questions?
From the, so we're all experts.
Not a
If you
single-
have questions, I would ask that you come up to the microphones again because it's being taped, being recorded.
Good morning,
Is it?
Brian,
Brian?
Russell, and Brett. I'm Bill Jones. I'm a 203K rehab consultant and appraiser. And I tell people and investors that I work with, you cannot do renovation if you don't know the as-is cost, the cost of renovation, and the after rehab value. So I will be in contact with you guys.
Great.
Thank you.
We look forward.
I just would mention for those, we are, to your point, we are trying to make sure the property that we acquire, and I think you guys have done the same thing, but we want to make sure that when you get property from us, that you know what its condition is. So one of the challenges a lot of folks have is they're acquiring property as is, and there's really not been disclosure as to what that really means. So there's been a history of properties being acquired by nonprofit groups, other groups that realized they were just saddled with someone's massive, problem. So property that comes out of the land bank, if we have an inspection report, if we have an environmental report, any information we have on the property, we will make available to the person who's looking at acquiring it. We'll also, to the best we can, try to get cost estimates on rehab and post-rehab value, so that if you are an individual or a nonprofit group or development entity of some sort, you're not going to be surprised by getting a property from us and then discovering that there was some massive issue that we never told you about. We will tell you. Obviously, the property we're getting, a lot of it's donation and very low value property where you can assume there's significant challenges. But we want to make sure that's a big difference, I think, between the traditional practice and what we're trying to establish, which is that we want to disclose what we know as much as we can, so you know what we know.
I would just add too, sir, that we're happy to talk to you, and I would encourage, I mean, this is kind of a developer forum in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of other players, appraisers, realtors, folks like that we need to be engaged in. We've got very limited kind of staff and resources, so it's very important that we engage folks like yourself that are really in the field, working with real buyers and that kind of thing. So we're happy to talk to you or whoever.
Hello, my name is Grant Bailey from Community Builders. It seems like a lot of the policies and procedures are geared towards single family. I was curious, in terms of assembling buildings or parcels for more development at scale in terms of apartment buildings, I was wondering what efforts are done to help facilitate that.
So the current transactions, I would say, on our part, are most of the smaller properties because there's less risk, so to speak. As we get the systems up and running, we want to make sure we know what our powers are and get the right resources in place. I would say that in general, with the exception of the fact that those larger transactions have to go through a committee review process, there really isn't any fundamental difference. So if people have properties they're looking to acquire, for example, there's properties that we've looked at with partners around abandonment, where someone's trying to acquire the property through abandonment and wants to transfer it then to us to hold it for them while they get their capital together and so on and so forth. That's certainly something we can do. We've got people who are trying to acquire property through tax purchases, where they bought the taxes on an abandoned property and they're waiting to get tax deed, and they're trying to get us involved to try to have an automatic conveyance to us. It really depends on the organization that's trying to execute, coming to us and saying, here are the properties that we'd like to get. And then understanding what are the opportunities to get those properties, because again, we don't have the ability to go out and just step in front of every other legal entity that has interest in that property. And a lot of the property you see that's in the market today has very complicated structures as far as who's got a position on the title and so on and so forth. So working with the abandonment statute is probably one of the most effective ways we can work together, but obviously it requires the municipal government and the courts to work with us. So bring forward the buildings you have and let's talk about them.
And I would just add too, in a lot of our communities, we've got kind of a land assembly plan in many of them. A lot of that is revolves around TODs, so Metro stops particularly. And we'll talk about one in Oak Forest, a project that's going on, but in, I think, 10 of our 12 municipality members, there's Metro stops kind of underutilized areas that need development that just never happened. So we're working on that in a number of different towns kind of already, and we would love to have a conversation with a large developer to come in, but that's what we're trying to do, is assemble land, in those kind of key areas, and then be able to attract a big developer to come in and do a project. So we're working that. We can talk specifically and look at specific areas, but something we are working on. And the property in Oak Forest we'll talk about later. We'll get into that a little bit, because that's a land assembly in conjunction with the city there. So we'll have some more information later too.
Good morning. I'm Gerald McWhorter. We know that when you're doing construction, time is money and money is time, right? And some of the biggest challenges is coordinating permits and things of that sort between the different villages in town. Has anything been set up to streamline that process?
Yeah, I mean, both land banks are working with, so the South Suburban Land Bank has municipal members, but the Cook County Land Bank still works with City of Chicago and other municipal members across Cook County as well. And MOUs and even IGAs with those municipalities to set up a streamlined system for acquiring property, holding and disposing of property in those municipalities is underway. And the IGA for the South Suburban Land Bank provides some of that structure, and our policies provide that structure of how we'll transact business in those communities. But we're crafting specific MOUs for each municipal member to address their procedures for transfer stamps, for any other inspections, when you need inspections done, how you resolve certain issues, especially with properties that have some issues with them going into that process. How can the land bank streamline that to get into the end use as quickly as possible? So hopefully we'll get to a stage where we have municipalities that understand when the land banks are involved, this is a good process. Let's go ahead and waive some of these requirements that are false barriers. They don't really address the underlying property conditions, but are a procedural hurdle we have to get beyond. Allow the land bank to go through smoothly, knowing that we're going to perform on the other side. And so,
and I would just add to the short answer is no. So, yeah, I mean, and I think to Brent's point, a lot of this is that we have to build relationships with the local authorities. Obviously, the local mayors and managers are responsible with the day-to-day management of the property in their communities. So we are very much want to be respectful of the fact that at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be accountable for that process. In some communities, the process is more cumbersome than others. The extent to which we can, as Brent points out, illustrate the benefit of streamlining and eliminating some of these barriers and getting that property back into use. I think it's really about just building the relationships of trust and making sure people understand what role we're playing, what role they're playing. The biggest thing I want people, if there are people here from municipalities, to take away from my perspective is I have no interest in trying to come in and undercut or circumvent your local authority. I want to come in and basically help expand your capacity to get this property back. So if there is a development entity who has identified a piece of property that has a legitimate ability to develop it, I'd like to think that most of the municipalities that we're dealing with would understand that the upside is to actually work with us and not throw up barriers. If they do throw up barriers and we can't surmount them, at the end of the day, they're stuck with that property. That's their responsibility, but that's what they want.
I would just add, we can't go around the permitting process, but at least with our land bank, because we have municipal members, if you have a project that you're bringing to us, you're going to know right away that municipality is going to be involved from day one. So, we'll talk a little bit about process later, but essentially when we get a property, the first call I make is to that municipality to see if there's interest in that project or that property. So you're going to at least have the advantage of having the municipality involved right from the beginning. That doesn't mean, it's going to make permits or anything easier to get, I guess, but at least you have already had that introduction and they're already working with us. So there should be some advantage to that, I would think.
So do we ask a question to the municipality of whether or not there is special situations addressing that problem, or do we buy the property from you, get there, find out the special situation that we might not be?
No, I think we have the conversation with the municipality right away. And as soon as we know you're interested or something, we have that, and we start that conversation so you know what you're getting into.
Yeah. So the South Suburban Land Bank, say for example, if we have a property in Blue Island and there's a project that's proposed for that property, our internal policies have us check in with the representatives from Blue Island, make sure that they're comfortable and they can vote on every transaction in their own communities. So a vote to proceed with a project with the land bank already includes a vote from that representative from that community endorsing the project. So it is a strong vote in that community that your project has the support of the local representatives. Again, hopefully that takes the next step and we have actually an MOU that sets a process for streamlining some of the later permitting stages. But all the existing laws still apply. We're just hoping to streamline around the edges of it to make sure it flows as smoothly as possible.
Oh, go to the next section? Okay. So this is a great segue to go to the next section. So. Okay, so the next section is how to donate and acquire property from the land banks. So we already saw this slide, I'll skip over that one. So this, we're going to go first, and I think South Suburban is going to go after, right? Or, I think that's how it's structured. Anyway, so first slide here talks about eligible acquirers. We are looking for individuals who are looking to acquire property for their personal use or who want to acquire side lots. So a piece of property is adjacent to a property you own and occupy that we may get as a piece of vacant land, and we can convey it to you. I will mention before I get into this that when we convey property out, again, the property is going to, in most cases, belong to the person who acquires it. You will take title to that property. It will no longer belong to us. We're looking for nonprofit and for-profit developers. We are looking to convey property to local governments and governmental bodies. We're also looking for nonprofit, community, and faith-based organizations who may have community strategies around gardens, urban agriculture, other types of projects. This is not an all-inclusive list. There may be somebody we didn't put on this list. If there's somebody who is in this room who says, hey, I'm not one of those, that's fine. Come and see us. We'll put you on the list, and you're okay. The basic point is we work with anybody who wants to acquire the property. But these are the people we're focused on mostly right now. In terms of our expectations, we want to see that the proposed end use aligns with our mission. So critically what that means is that the property can be put back into productive use soon. We don't want to see people take land and then sit on it. That defeats the purpose of having it conveyed to you. So we're not looking to have you basically acquire property as a way of rounding out an investment portfolio and then just sit on it for a while. That's not going to be the way we want to work. We want to make sure the end use aligns with local interests and needs. So that could be both in terms of from a planning perspective, but also there's a lot of interest in trying to make sure that properties are being put back into use for homeownership in one area or rental in an area, or aligning with transjoint development, or whatever those local interests are. So you'll see when we get into the application, we actually ask you in your application for property, have you consulted with local interests and to tell us who those local interests are. We know in the city of Chicago that most people, when they're doing projects, the first person they talk to is the alderman. There are lots of other groups in the city of Chicago we'd like to see you consulting with that include community-based organizations, local institutions. We want to know that you actually have been taking time to be thoughtful about how you connect to the community. The capacity to close, rehab, and occupy in a timely fashion is very important for us. We are not, by ordinance, able to convey property to folks that have existing tax delinquencies or outstanding code violations on other properties. And if you are coming to us and you've had a past history of having had tax delinquencies, we may have a challenge because the ordinance does not want to see us conveying property to people who have not paid their taxes historically. Lastly, is the acquirer has to be able to pay the closing costs, pay our costs at closing. So the costs that we incur to acquire, hold, and convey. We are exploring ways of converting some of the cash costs into soft second, deed restrictions that go with the property, so that you're not having to exchange cash. But the expectation is, we incur costs on behalf of the public and the taxpayer. We want to get those dollars back. So we are not going to be giving, we're not going to go out and buy a piece of property or acquire a piece of property and hold it for a long time and give it to you for free. That kind of defeats the purpose and also will put us out of business. We put together a list of common questions that we hear. So first one, how can I see and research the properties? We're going to be acquiring property on a rolling basis. You'll see when we get into the discussion on what we've already acquired and what we're going to acquire. It's mostly smaller single-family homes, kind of similar to what they've done in South Suburban. But we're going to be expanding the inventory of properties that we acquire and the types of property. And all of that is going to go up onto our website through a property inventory tracking system. So within, by the end of this month, by the end of August as our target, you'll be able to go on that website, see each property, see the costs that we've incurred up to the date in which you're looking at it. There'll be information in terms of the context of the surrounding community. A whole bunch of information will be available. It'll be available up until the point that the property is closed to somebody else or goes under contract to somebody else, at which point that property will come off. So there'll never be a question of trying to figure out what does the land bank have, because it'll be on that website. Is the property free? No, we already covered that one. Can the land bank clear taxes and liens on property or that already owned? No. If you acquire property that has tax liens or other types of liens on it, we don't have the ability to abate those for you. We can abate property before you, depending on how we acquire. We can abate those taxes or clear liens depending on how it's acquired before you acquire. So it's very important that you speak to us and engage us before you go out and acquire the property. And if you're currently holding property that has those issues, maybe one of the things you can do is look to try to convey it to somebody else, utilize the land bank that way, but of course, you're not going to be able to get the benefit there. Leasing of land or property. We do have the ability to lease property, and as I said, we prefer to convey the title directly to you, but in some situations, it makes more sense for us to hold land and then lease it. So we'll be reviewing those on a case-by-case basis to make sure they align with our policies and our procedures as well as our budget mission. Deed restrictions, I've already talked about, we want to convey the property to you without deed restrictions, which I think is an important thing to know. And then we talked about, do we have the ability to get approval and execute transactions? The approval for all transactions the land bank is involved with, not, barring the engagement of local municipal authorities who have to have some oversight on that stuff as well. But as far as our role in those deals, those are through me and through our board, and that's pretty much it. So it's a very simple process for people who are looking to go about acquiring property. So in terms of our procedures, we have a pre-qualification form. It's actually included in your packets today. It's also on our website. You will fill it out, submit it to us. We go through and review it. We'll follow up and collect additional information to make sure the person acquiring is actually qualified, meaning you have the capacity to close, you've done the due diligence with your community partners, you actually have a strategy that makes sense in line with what we're trying to accomplish. You can visit our website to identify property, or you can come in with property you've already identified. We will, assuming we can reach an agreement, we'll put together a conveyance agreement. It's essentially a purchase contract that sets the standard for how we're conveying the property to you. We're going to be asking for a deposit. I think the deposit is $5. What is the deposit we put in there? It's a very modest deposit that we put in there just to make sure that you're actually going to move to close. And then the property is conveyed via quitclaim and as is. And again, as I noted earlier, we're letting you know what the condition is as much as we know about it. So you'll be getting a lot of information about the property. So there you go. Inspection reports, other due diligence. We'll make sure we get that to you. We want to transfer the property as quickly as we can. So we want to try to move as fast as we can. We'd like to be moving faster than we currently are, but that's just as a part of getting ourselves up and running. You'll know the accrued expenses. What happens if somebody if more than one party wants the property? Generally speaking, we're going to convey the property by auction to the highest bidder if there's competition for a specific property. But we're also going to be looking at what is the mission of the land bank trying to accomplish. And so if there is a mission priority that trumps someone else, and if that party has come in earlier than the person who wants to acquire it, then we will most likely try to hold down and see if that person with the more mission-oriented perspective can close on the property. But if it's a situation where two parties have come together at the same time, they both want the property, it's going to be done by auction to the highest bidder and keep it clear and clean that way. And then the last note I put up here is that we do have the ability to structure unique conveyances. So there may be things that we want to try to accomplish that we haven't already thought of or we haven't started to put together the framework to accomplish. We have the ability to draft unique agreements as we need to. And that's, I think, an important piece. We're trying not to be super cookie cutter. In terms of conveying property to us, again, the people who could consider donating or conveying property to us, individuals, nonprofit, for-profit firms, local governments and governmental bodies wishing for us to have property held on their behalf, REO properties within bank or the Fannie and Freddie inventories, and then others. We've had investors who contacted us, people who acquired property, the market tanked, they're now stuck with property they can't develop. We're trying to figure out how to accommodate as many of those different requests as we can, but again, we have to know the property can be redeveloped. We can't have you, giving us 100 vacant lots or, a building that's got, some kind of huge environmental issue that you want to just, dump on us. That's not going to happen. So it requires us figuring out how we can reposition that property before we can start to accept it. Property that's being conveyed can have unpaid or delinquent taxes, liens, code violations, or other encumbrances. I will caution you that in some cases, some of the properties we're currently trying to close, we're not able to close those properties because of code violations. That gets back to Brent's point about trying to work with the local municipal authorities to get some waivers on some of that stuff. But obviously, we can take stuff that has some of the unpaid delinquent taxes or other liens. We're going to prioritize our acquisitions with the ability to repurpose and dispose in a reasonable time frame. So again, we're not holding stuff long term. Property that is totally obsolete, the building has been completely destroyed, the land is really not able to be redeveloped. We're going to be looking at deconstruction or demolition, but we may request cash donations to offset. So we have had a conversation going on with one of the GSEs about donating about 100 properties to us, where we anticipate that the cost of the land bank would be over $1.5 million. We're not going to take those properties from them because they're legally obligated to pay the demolition costs. If they don't want to pay the demolition costs, then that's going to be their problem. So I want people to understand that, you know, we are not the dumping ground for all the bad property and bad decisions. We have to operate within a sort of a market context of what other people. And then conditions under which we'll accept or negotiate on a case-by-case basis because every property is different. So again, these are going to be unique structures and arrangements in most cases. The considerations that we look at when we're acquiring properties of potential end use, the alignment between its anticipated end use and local plans and needs, the ability to clear title. In some cases, we just can't clear the title. It's just too difficult, so we can't take the property through the land bank. And then the anticipated cost for us to hold the property conveyed out to future use. So, you know, pretty basic stuff there, I think. Again, the procedures we have at the land bank are basically fill out the pre-qualification form. If you have a piece of property you'd like to donate, you know, fill out a form and tell us a little bit of information about the property. So, key things we want to know is what are the legal encumbrances on that property. We've had people who come to us and said, I have property I'd like to donate, and we ask them, well, does it have liens? Are there taxes on it? What's going on with the property? I don't know. We are not a property research organization. If it's your property, take the time. We're going to teach you today some of the tools that we're using. Take the time to find out before you come to us, to find out what's going on with that piece of property. Because we don't have the resources to go through a portfolio of vacant lots or single-family homes that you acquired at some point and try to tell you what the issues are. But that's the form. It's a very simple. The forms we have are pretty short. They're like 4 pages each, so they're relatively simple forms. Again, we'll review those and follow up with you, and then we'll prepare a conveyance agreement which will allow us to accept and try to move to schedule closing as quickly as we can. Okay. Other types of properties we won't accept? Not really. Every property is open for acceptance. It depends on what the conditions are. Are we going to accept all properties? No. Some properties we're going to turn back and say we can't accept those. I'm sorry, we have no ability to accept those. Will we accept portfolios? Absolutely. If you have a portfolio of property, if you assemble properties that you're going to use and now you can't use them, that's a conversation to have with us because maybe we can help to hold those properties for future redevelopment. We are taking properties that we'll accept through foreclosure, abandonment, forfeiture, no cash bid, and other means. So we're going to explore every strategy that's useful for us and is available to us to acquire property where it makes sense. So let's talk about how that works. And Brent's going to talk more about that as far as some of the legal issues that we encounter. Next steps: review our land transactions policy, review the pre-qualification forms for donors and for acquirers. Those are on our website and are also in the land and the resource guide. That's our address and how to get in touch with us. Okay.
This is another example where I'm going to say what he said. Where the process is very similar. We're looking for the same types of properties and things. What I would just say, a couple things. On the acquisition side, so if you're bringing properties to us, or if you're interested in what kind of properties we look at, we get properties from all kinds of sources. So we get properties from banks, REOs, from individuals, other nonprofits, for-profit folks. There's just a lot of different places we can get something from. So we have complete flexibility there. On the disposition side, same thing. We don't have a lot of set parameters. What we're going to do is look at every project on a case-by-case basis. So if that requires underwriting of the project, I think what the county has as far as a pre-qualification form, we don't have that. If you want to use that for us, that's fine, that's perfect. We just need to know, kind of capacity, what your plan is, so we can really review it. I've got underwriting and development background, so it's pretty easy for us to look at projects and give you an assessment fairly quickly. Is this something that makes sense economically? Is it something that the land bank can be involved in? So what I would encourage is just, kind of submit something. If it's coming to me, you can use the county's form. You can give me a very brief kind of outline of what you're trying to do and what the property is, and we can kind of underwrite it from there. We'll obviously ask you if we need more information, but it's very case by case. One of the things we've learned about in doing this for the short time we've been doing it is everything's different. All these transactions are different. All the municipalities are different. So there's just a lot of different kind of wheels moving at the same time, and so we're trying to be mindful of that and look at everything kind of on a case by case basis. When we acquire something, it's kind of the same calculation. We want to be able to convey it in a way that we pay for the expenses, at least that we have into it, but we also want to convey it so that the end user is getting it at an attractive enough price so they can do something. So if it's a developer, it's got to be cheap enough so you can do what you need to do and then sell it or rent it and make what you need to make out of it. So, keep in mind, I guess, from the economic standpoint, like Brian said, we're not a dumping ground. We don't have those kind of finances. But we do have enough other kind of players and partners that we can put together pretty big transactions. But we need your help and we need you guys to come forward with those. And I would just say, Brent reminded me of something we will look at. Brownfields, so contaminated properties, is not something we will just say no to. We will look at it and see if there's a way to work it out and figure out if it makes sense. We have a very large 13-acre parcel we're working on right now that may be interesting to some of you here. But that's brownfield site, so we're kind of working through those issues and see what we can and can't do. But that's just an example of we'll look at basically everything, and we're happy to have that conversation and then see if it makes sense. So that's kind of all I want to say about acquisitions. We do questions there with it? Okay, questions.
And before we, Russ made me think of something I wanted to make sure I mentioned also as far as kind of the conduit agreement or the relationships we have. I think both land banks would be interested in, I'm not going to say we're going to be interested in going shopping for you with the project, but if we know what you're looking for in terms of the types of properties you're trying to acquire, we can kind of keep our ears open for those types of properties. So we've had people at the county land bank who have come and said, we're looking to acquire this type of property in these particular areas. Great, I'll keep my ears open. If I see a property that fits that profile, I can let them know. We've got people who are saying we're looking for condominiums for particular types of projects. Great, condominiums typically are not a huge attractive opportunity for many different development firms because of the complexity of dealing with condos, but if that's something you're interested in, good to know because there tends to be condominiums available. It's just the more information we have, the more information we can collect, and the more information we can get from you, the better we are to really respond to what your specific needs are. So keep in mind that is something that land banks can do, is to, as I said, I wouldn't say we're going to go shopping for you, but we can certainly start to keep our ears open and look for particular opportunities that match what you're trying to execute.
I would just add to that, from a lot of our municipal members, a lot of them also have land they currently own, so some of it we work on with them, some of it they may have already had and they're holding on to it for whatever reason. So there's a lot of opportunities with those kind of parcels that are out there. We're happy to put you into those conversations too. It may or may not be a role for either one of the land banks in those situations, but they're out there and something you folks should be aware of, that there's a lot of kind of governmental owned property that can be acted on now. So just, I guess, keep that in mind too.
So I think we have about 15 minutes left before our lunch break. If anybody does have questions, and I hate to be the one that keeps you from getting a chance to eat or go to the bathroom or get coffee, but does anybody have any questions while we're still here on this topic? Okay. Oh, yes, we did, okay.
Sorry, Brian, besides requesting you use a bigger font next time on your PowerPoints, have you seen any interest from the other Collier counties like Kane, Lake, McHenry, interested land banks, Clear Lake? That's where I represent in Lake, so.
I can tell you from our standpoint, now that we're kind of expanding out into Will, So we've got interest from Will County. I've also met with some folks from DuPage County. They're just thinking about it, trying to understand it. Haven't talked to anybody from anywhere north of that, but I would imagine as this kind of moves along, there will be interest. There's not a lot of reason not to do something, I guess, from their standpoint. It's just kind of how you set it up, I guess.
And maybe waiting a couple of years to see how it plays out.
That too.
There are definitely communities in Lake County that are talking about the idea of land bank. The problem is getting the seed money early on to get the first initial acquisitions underway. There isn't a funding, ongoing source of revenue for land banks right now. So the 2 land banks here exist because they got a grant to exist. So without that initial grant, it's difficult. But I think there are the same agencies that gave grants to South Suburban and Cook County land banks, I think are interested in expanding those type of opportunities to other counties as well.
And I would also just say too, one of the things we learned kind of going through this process is that there may be ways to kind of baby step the land bank, where if you have a municipality that maybe has some extra staff or capacity, that they could kind of get it going a little bit until it's ready to move on to the next step and maybe hire, dedicated staff. So one of the things we've learned is, this is kind of a difficult startup process, but there's probably other ways to do it that would mitigate some of that and mitigate some of the funding difficulties too.
I would just say one quick thing while we have a second. There's a unique opportunity for both land banks to jump into a transaction involving property that is in a great location that has been untouched for a while. Maybe it's a brownfield, maybe there's just been past issues, but currently it's sitting in a state that needs some entity to step in, clean off back title, and get it going again. And we've done it. Municipalities have filled that role for a long time with brownfield redevelopment. There are grants that are available to local governments that are not available to for-profit developers to start a redevelopment process of a brownfield or some rehab of an abandoned parcel that's blighted for some reason, but that is currently vacant. Both land banks would be in a great position to step in and perform that role of either accepting grant funding or performing a conduit for a larger development in a certain area. Where, like Russ said, there's a 13-acre parcel in the south suburbs that fits that bill right now. But I know it's very residential focused, and that is a big focus of both land banks, but there are unique opportunities in both commercial and industrial reuse where a land bank has served a vital role in other states, and I think would do the same thing in Cook County.
You spoke about the land bank being able to help in terms of repurposing land for other uses. Does that mean that you're able to facilitate rezoning if need be?
I think the rezoning, I would say generally the rezoning falls in the same bucket as the code issues or permitting. If the municipality is willing to rezone parcels for a particular repurposing, it's going to go through the local zoning authority to do that. We would certainly be supportive of that, but we're going to defer to the local municipality as to whether that fits their objectives, because obviously that's their prerogative.
Yeah, the advantage that the land banks have is not that we have legal authority to bypass that process so that we could change zoning, but that we're positioned in a way that because we're members or because we've had constant contact with those municipalities, hopefully we could convince a local government to help us all put together a larger project, including rezoning or whatever entitlements are.
Okay, so those are you have a question? Oh, great.
Hi, I'm LaShawn Brown-Davis with the Planning Coalition in the Southeast Side and South Shore. And you all had talked about, as you establish relationships with organizations and things like that, is there a process by which if someone were to propose to do multiple plots or something like that of land, that there is some authority who would manage and assist in that, be it by to be a helpful resource or to be in some instances, unfortunately, a gatekeeper that is local to an organization. For example, Chicago, we have board-based, we have community organizations. Would there be any recommended organization that someone should or would go through to establish the relationship or a proposal to come to the Land Bank Authority to work on multiple properties?
Well, I mean, I think we're fortunate because in the city of Chicago or in Cook County in general, there are any number of local organizations that are engaged in activity. I mean, I think as a practical matter, in the city of Chicago, typically the ones playing the gatekeeper role is probably your local alderman. So that's, I mean, come on, we're all over in Chicago, we know how this works. I think the people that we've talked to, the aldermen that I've talked to who have this property are very receptive to working with the land bank. They're trying to figure out how to get this land repurposed. So the issue you identify, which is the ability to assemble those parcels into some kind of a plan, is exactly the role the land bank can play. The way we approach this is if there is somebody who is, and there are projects we're working on right now on this strategy, typically what's going to happen is if somebody approaches me about a particular piece of property, one of the questions I'm going to ask, if it's in the city of Chicago, is have you talked to the folks at planning and development? Have you talked to the local alderman? Just give me a sense of what the position is. Now, in some cases, that community organization may not have as much support as they probably are going to need, and that's okay. In other cases, they may have the support lined up and they're just looking for us to agree to participate. So depending on the context of the situation, we can then go back to the city or to that partner and say, yes, we are willing to play the role of helping to hold the property. We will accept them into our inventory. Everyone understands what roles we're playing. I think Brent maybe used the term earlier. There's not an end around the local municipal authority, and the dynamic of how things work in Cook County is probably not going to change super fast. But I think we can start to create more affirmative relationships just by being really honest about it. And showing that there's an initiative here, but for lack of the ability to hold that land while the parcels are assembled, we could not move forward. Now we actually have that tool, we can actually start to use it.
I would say from our standpoint too, if you don't have that relationship with one of our municipalities, we would certainly make those introductions and put you in touch with the right people. And then if it's a matter of if you're coming down to the south suburbs and you need some assistance with other organizations or partners to work with, we would want to be that kind of conduit to help you set up through those kind of organizations as well. But yeah, we'll go back to the to the local folks. That's who we're going to have to work with. But as far as the South Suburban, we've got those folks already on our board and engaged. So we do have kind of a step up in that case if it's an area where you don't have any relationships.
Okay. I have a question. You are an independent agency?
Am I?
Well, your organization.
The land bank is a unit of county government.
And with your portfolio, will you be on the exchange? The stock exchange?
No.
Okay.
No, we're both governmental entities, so we're not for-profit. We're not for-profit. We're both agencies, I guess is the right term.
Intergovernmental agency for South Suburban, and then, an entity of Cook County. But the ordinance creating the Cook County Land Bank delegates a wide range of authority to the actual land bank itself, the land bank board. So as Brian mentioned earlier, there's no decision that has to go beyond the land bank board to the Cook County Board of Commissioners to vote on. They've delegated the authority to handle the land bank business down to a land bank board. And then even the land bank board is delegated down to Brian, a lot of authority to handle transactions. So it will, don't let the large Cook County name scare you off that that's not going to be a speedy transaction. Brian has the authority to take action quickly, as does Russ. And on the local level or on the intergovernmental level, we have it down to the same executive committees that can act within 48 hours. They need board approval, and a lot of transactions don't need board approval, so Russ could act on them immediately. So they're set up to be lean and streamlined, but there's a lot of unique transactions out there, so a lot of this will go back to the board to discuss whether this is a good project to be involved in.
Seems to me that one of the biggest blights in this country are the malls that have been abandoned. You have a lot of malls, you know, those shopping malls that are now.
We're working on several strip center basically type properties, but yeah, that's a big issue in the south suburbs.
It's a great idea for, great opportunity for repurposing. I hope
Yes,
that happens.
yes.
Are there any final questions? Okay, so I know we're all very anxious to see what's in that buffet, but let me give you a very quick overview of what the rest of the afternoon entails. So we will break for lunch. We're going to have actually a very special message broadcast on the screen, so we hope that you can be back in your seats by noon. The private bank wants to make an announcement, and we'll have a guest appearance from Cook County Board President Tony President. So if you can come back to your seats by noon, that would be great. And then after lunch, we will be talking about, we'll hear about some of the land bank's recent transactions, as well as finally learn about how can you actually do research that they're talking about. And then finally, we'll hear about probably the topic that we're most interested in is financial resources to support your business with the land bank. So we'll break for lunch and we'll reconvene at 12:30, but hopefully you'll be back in your seats at noon. Thanks.